Hey everyone, my name is Sean Rowland. I run the website stadiumandarenavisits.com, where I travel around to different sports facilities around the country, enjoying being a part of it, fans culture for a little while and observing the architecture and things like that. Part of that is I'm just a huge sports fan, and I've always been a huge college sports fan as well. And the last 10, 20 years, the restructuring of college conferences has kind of driven me crazy because it's all due to money and greed. And we've gotten away what, really in essence makes conferences what should make a conference, which is, similar geography, similar schools and history as well. And, the point of a conference is to help structure, a regular season. So I've done this a few times on the website where I've kind of created conferences based on similarities, and I want to do that again, but a little bit more in depth. And we'll take a look at the FBS level for college football. I'm going to kind of rename it Division 1A, the old school way of how it was characterized, mainly because this new way won't have playoffs involved. So before we dive into creating college conferences, just a little bit of background here. So the goal is to set up conferences based on geography, history, and similar schools. We want the road teams fans to be able to travel, fans and family and friends and whatnot, and obviously their fan base to be able to travel, and also again makes it a little bit easier for everybody playing the sport to have an easier road trip. So we're looking to try and do 10 teams each. So that's a total of 13 conferences and 130 teams at the 1A level. And 10 teams will also work at different sports. And another video down the road will do different sports. But for example, with college basketball, if you have a 10-team conference, you can play a home and home series during the season. So 9 home games, 9 away games, play each other twice. In terms of college football, that means that you can have a regular season where you play each team in your conference once, so 9 conference games. You can have 3 non-conference games and then 1 bye week. So it's a 13-week season. And that would mean the season would start the last Saturday in August and finish Thanksgiving weekend. And then you get into the playoffs. And the playoffs would involve 24 teams. So that's 18% of the 1A teams. 13 of those conference championships would all make the playoffs, and then you have 11 at-large teams. And at-large teams will be selected by a formula. You don't want to involve humans here who can easily be biased or have other agendas and things like that. So that's how you select at-large teams. The top 8 ranked teams get a bye into round 2, and all these games are home except for the championship game, which would be at a neutral site. So your playoffs would run through December, and then your title game would end up being in mid-January. Now, I know a lot of this isn't really realistic. However, I know the video game NCAA Football 25 is coming out, in a couple days on July 19th. So I'm hoping I can try and set this up, while doing that and live in fantasy land with more structured conferences. So we'll see what we can do. All right, it's kind of a fun exercise to do this, so looking forward to creating these conferences. If you just want to skip ahead in the video and just go to the end result, we'll kind of summarize that at the end. I'll put in the info section the time on the video that you can jump to what this looks like at the end. So let's get started. Now, again, 13 conferences. So I kind of want to start with some conferences that already make sense, where you have your base in there in terms of history and similar schools and things like that. So let's start, I guess, with the SEC. And the SEC was a 10-team conference for a very long time until the early 90s, and then they added Arkansas and South Carolina. We're going to skip Texas A&M and Missouri as well. They belong elsewhere. But Arkansas and South Carolina joined in 1992, I believe. 92 they joined. And before that, I want to keep most of the core 10 teams that were in the conference before that time. So the SEC will consist of Alabama, and we'll put Auburn in there as well. And we will also have Georgia. And then the two Mississippi schools. So Mississippi State in Starkville and Ole Miss in Oxford. Oops, sorry about that. All right, so far we have 5 schools. We'll also keep the Tennessee schools as well. So we'll have the Volunteers, and we'll also continue with Vanderbilt. I know it's a little questionable based on team quality and things like that, but geographically it makes sense, and so does the history. So we're at 2, 4, 6, 7 schools. We will also stick to Florida. I toyed a little bit with creating a Florida only conference, but I don't think there's enough teams. I mean, you could probably get to 5 or 6 teams here, and then I'm not sure what you do beyond that. And you could get to 7 or 8, but it got a little difficult to make a Florida only conference. But Gainesville's essentially North Florida, so it certainly is close enough to these schools. And then we'll also include LSU. And right now we are at 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9. So our 10th school, Arkansas is in Fayetteville. So I think they will fit. Remember, they were in the Southwest Conference back in the day. So I think they will fit elsewhere. So we're going to keep Arkansas out. But I think it'll make sense down the road on where they go. So the question is, do you have South Carolina or do you have Kentucky? And I'm going to go with South Carolina. And again, I know they're the newer team with Kentucky joining in 1932, South Carolina more in the early 90s. But Kentucky's kind of further north, and I know this will certainly anger Wildcat fans. But in order to keep a 10-team conference, there's some things that you got to debate here, and I could see how South Carolina um, could fit in the ACC, but they're going to end up having too many teams. So just off the bat, I feel like, especially from a basketball perspective, Kentucky, Louisville, Cincinnati really makes sense, and there's some other teams that we can get in there too that I think Midwest-ish or whatever you want to call this conference will kind of fit a little bit better. So we will go with South Carolina for our 10th SEC team, or the Gamecocks. Here they are. All right, so here's your SEC, and we will get that set up over here. I'll pause the video for a second so I can get everything in on the left side. And here is your SEC. Now, while we're in this area, let's work on the ACC. So here's the SEC. Now at the ACC, let's start with the obvious teams. So let's go with your core here of North Carolina and Virginia schools. So we'll have Duke. We will have North Carolina. We'll also put NC State in there as well. All right, kind of gets clustered together pretty quickly. Or the Wolfpack, here they are. All right, so you got NC State and Raleigh. Now we'll add Wake Forest over in Winston-Salem. Let's add the Virginia schools. So you'll have Virginia Tech and Virginia. So again, we're sticking with history here. So that's 2, 4, 6 schools. We'll also include Georgia Tech. And we'll have our Florida schools. So FSU and Miami. And I know Miami's new addition, but it's good to have a pairing here, or new addition, but relative new addition, late 90s. So it's good to have a pairing though with Florida State and Miami together. So that brings us to 2, 4, 6, 8, 10? I think I got all 10. So Virginia, Virginia Tech, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, um, 8, 9. Oh, Clemson. Sorry. Sorry, Tigers. All right, there we go. So there's our 10-team conference for the ACC. So you have Virginia schools, you have North Carolina, you have Clemson, Georgia Tech pretty close together, and you have Florida State and Miami close together. So overall, pretty good for road trips, especially the clustering in this area. So ACC really makes sense. Again, that's a historical group. Most of them have been together for a long time, and Virginia Tech and Miami in the old Big East. Again, I think you can understand why they're together in the ACC. And here's your ACC: Clemson, Duke, Georgia Tech, Florida State, NC State, North Carolina, Miami, Virginia, Virginia Tech, and Wake Forest. All right, let's now move on to let's go to the Big Ten, where again things are um, mostly written out for us. The old Big Ten obviously was named after 10 conferences. So, or sorry, 10 schools. So let's stick with that. A lot of these teams, again, all belong together. So we'll go from east to west here. We have Ohio State. We will have Purdue, Indiana, and we are going to leave out Penn State. And I know Nittany Lion fans are going to huff and puff about that. But they, were an independent for a long time, and then early 90s became part of the Big Ten. To me, they're an Eastern school, so we're going to stick them in the Northeast when we get there. Yes, geographically, they're close-ish to a lot of these Big Ten schools, and of course, they have the perennial power, and they, match up, better with a lot of these schools. But we'll get into the Northeast in a second, but Penn State is going to be left out, this 10-team conference. All right, back to Michigan here. So we have Michigan State, Michigan. Let's get to Illinois and Northwestern. So we have 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we're going to have Wisconsin, Iowa, and Minnesota. And this will be your Big Ten, which was what the Big Ten was for a long, long time. Iowa City is somewhere in here. Here it is. And finally, Madison. All right. There is your Big Ten. So some powerhouse programs, all quality programs, similar and solid geography as well. So Big Ten just makes sense. Let's also stick in the Midwest in this area as well. Another conference that makes sense and has always been long and dear to my heart is the MAC, and one that's been pretty stable, where most of these are Midwest schools that have been together for a long time. Now it is a 12-team conference, soon to be 13 with UMass, which is stupid. But the 12 teams that we will exclude, well, we'll show you along the way here, but there's a couple fringe areas that we're going to exclude. So if you can see if you can figure that out along the way. Let's add our Ohio schools. So we have Akron, and then we have Kent State, and we'll need Toledo, and also the University of Ohio, which is in a kind of a desolate area in Athens. Yep, there it is. All right, so we have our 4 Ohio schools. I'm sorry, 5. There's Miami of Ohio as well, and Oxford. Okay, so we have our 5 Ohio schools. Let's add our Michigan schools as well. So that's Eastern Michigan and Ypsilanti, Western Michigan and Kalamazoo. Oops. And Central Michigan in Mount Pleasant. I love the MAC. I really do. I've been to four football games out here: Kent, Akron, Toledo, and Eastern Michigan. I'd say Toledo has the best stadium experience. But anyway, it's good stuff. Indiana schools, we have Ball State in Muncie. And who am I forgetting? Oh, I'm sorry, Bowling Green. I'm sorry, there's another Ohio school. Sorry about that. And Bowling Green as well. All right. And did I give everyone two, three, five, seven, eight, nine, 10? So you can see how wonderfully compact this is. Again, similar type schools, been together forever, very compact. There's two outliers though. We have the University of Buffalo, which joined in the 90s, and then also Northern Illinois. Buffalo, I'm fine leaving out. Northern Illinois, I hate leaving out, especially given that, yeah, remember they actually went to a high quality bowl game not too long ago with an undefeated season. But we have 10 teams and we can't go beyond that. So we can't include Northern Illinois. If we did, I don't know who you would take out of this. Um, so this is your MAC. That's the MAC conference. Again, nice and tidy. We're four conferences down here, and we have nine more to go. Now let's head east. I teased Penn State as well, but you remember there's some ACC schools that aren't in the ACC anymore. So we need a Big East, and we're gonna bring back the Big East. So let's put that conference back together. And if you remember, that consisted of Pitt, Syracuse, Boston College, and we also have Rutgers from the Big Ten, old Big Ten. And we have four schools so far in the Big East that have come back. Let's not forget about West Virginia. Backyard Brawl comes back. There's a conference game. And we will put Penn State in here as well. And also another former Big Ten team in Maryland. Now, I know Maryland was a long, long time ACC school. I did leave them out of the ACC. I still think that if you look at that conference, um, again, I would say that the Florida schools, maybe if you were able to make a Florida conference, you could bring Maryland and West Virginia into the ACC. I think that'd be okay. But keeping those two schools, Florida State and Miami, in there forces Maryland to be part of the Big East, which is fine. Again, I think, these matchups, Maryland and Penn State and Rutgers, yes, they don't have the tradition that that a lot of the other schools have between games or between teams, but I still think it makes sense to put Maryland in here. And then I do think we can bring UConn back in. Certainly a program on hard times, but don't forget they were Fiesta Bowl, Orange Bowl, not that long ago. They do have a 40,000 seat stadium as well. So I mean, they have a quality stadium too. And yeah, so now we are at a point where what else do? You've got three school, one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight. So you have eight schools. Yes, I know Penn State is the big dog here, but there's no reason that West Virginia can't compete with them. There's also no reason that Syracuse can't come back, and even Rutgers can make a run at them, and maybe even Pitt. So I understand that Penn State might run this conference, but they won't run it in basketball and possibly some other sports too. These are similar schools, and again, that's the outlier in being a little bit bigger, but I think it makes more sense. So we have eight schools here. So what do we do for the other two schools? We're kind of missing some larger programs. We do have the option of adding the University of Buffalo. But I just don't think they fit into the Big East, from stadium quality and program quality and things like that. So we are going to drop UB to the Division I AA level. Sorry, Bulls. Never been a fan of you anyway. I hate that or New York State's powerhouse school. It drives me nuts. But we will drop UB. I just don't think there's a good place for them. Another school that we're going to drop that does make complete sense is UMass. They play in an absolutely horrible stadium. They've been independent forever. They've been terrible at football forever. I think it makes sense for them to go back to the FCS or 1AA level. So UMass will drop as well. So what other Northeast schools do we have? We have the service academies, and I don't know where else you would put them as a conference. Right now we have they were independent, and then and Navy's also in the American conference as well, but that's an outlier because the Americans stretched everywhere. So I think we put the service academies into the Big East, and I know there's a quality issue there too. But from a facility standpoint, from an alumni standpoint, I think they're fine in there, and I don't think the members would mind playing them. Army Rutgers every year sounds good to me. So does Maryland and Navy every year as well. So we will put the academies in here. So Navy's in Annapolis and West Point for the Army. And this is your Big East. Army, Boston College, Navy, Penn State, Pitt, Maryland, Syracuse, Rutgers, UConn, and West Virginia. There's one more Northeastern school that we could have put in here as well. We could have put Temple here. However, it's a program that plays in a pro stadium. I know there were talks of building a stadium, not Center City, but I think North Philadelphia near campus. I don't know if that's materialized, but yeah, I mean, I think Temple we will also drop to a double A level, and that will kind of set us up as well for when we get to basketball and creating a basketball conference for some of these Northeastern schools. So you'll end up having Temple, Rhode Island, back together, St. Joseph's, UMass, things like that. I'm not sure what we'll do with 1AA football, but regardless, again, I could see how you could put Temple and UMass and replace them with Army and Navy, but I think Army and Navy are bigger, to be honest with you. All right, so that is our Big East Conference. And now, where do we go from here? So we could start talking about some of the outliers we've left with Kentucky. There's a big one on the board in Notre Dame. But before we do that, we'll come back to this area. But I do want to go to the old Big 8 or Big 12 and work on that. So, in the old days, we had the Big 8. So let's put some of those teams back together here. So we have Kansas State. We have Kansas. Nebraska, of course, is much better suited here than the Big 10. There's Iowa State. Ames. There's Ames. All right, so we have these 4 schools in the old Big 8. Let's also continue that downward. So we will include Missouri. And we have our 5 schools here. And now we're at 5. We could look into Oklahoma and Oklahoma State and Colorado. However, I do think there's a few things that we could do to make this conference help fit our Midwest-ish issues that we had out here. So I'm thinking that Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, we're going to keep with the Texas schools. And as far as Colorado is concerned, I'm thinking that they're going to become more of a mountain conference, and we'll keep them out of here. So you certainly could go Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, but again, we have some other schools out here that we can include. So we're at 5 right now. Don't forget that we have Cincinnati hanging out there, which is now a Big 12 member, whatever you want to call the conference. And this is where I like the Cincinnati, Louisville, Kentucky cluster. Natural rivals, heated rivals, between Kentucky and Louisville. And Cincinnati certainly can make an argument for some rivalry stuff as well. So we're going to add these three schools, and then we will also add Notre Dame. So we have this cluster that's not that far away. I mean, these are road trips that, if I pull up Google Maps, let's do Lawrence just for the heck of it. Let's do Lawrence to Lexington. And it's a 9-hour road trip. Obviously, that's really, really lengthy, but you can drive it, and it's not that terribly far off from some of the southern schools out here. So it is a distance away, but since we're doing 10-team conference and they kind of got squeezed out, I think Kentucky should be really happy with the quality of some of these teams. You're playing Notre Dame, you're playing Louisville, that's been on and off really, really good. Um, Nebraska, Kansas State, Iowa State are all quality programs as well. Yes, I know it's not the SEC, but you also have an amazing basketball conference too. Cincinnati, Louisville, Kansas, Kansas State, Missouri at times. Iowa State certainly is a top 10 team at times. So you have an amazing basketball conference too. And again, you're a little bit more geographically together. So that puts us at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 teams. So we need one more. And the other SEC school that we left out was Arkansas. And when you think Arkansas, you know, I know a lot of people might think Little Rock and like around here. Campus is actually in Fayetteville, and Fayetteville is in the northwest corner of the state. So it's not that far off from these schools that you associate with Big 12. So I know Arkansas, you think Southeast, but I mean, it's actually closer. I know Missouri's an SEC school, but it's closer to a lot of these schools as well. So you can still keep the Arkansas Kentucky games. Arkansas Missouri is a natural rival. And overall, again, this is a conference that geographically kind of makes sense. And you put it together and you take some outliers that got squeezed out a little bit from the other 10-team conferences. You have some natural rivals, and I think it comes together pretty well. So what do you call this conference? You can't call it the Big Eight. You can't call it the Big 12. There's 10 teams. So I really don't have a great name for it. I'm going to call it the Metro Conference because in the early 90s, there was a conference with Cincinnati, Louisville, Dayton, I think, DePaul, schools like that. And I don't have a good name for this conference. So if someone else does, maybe we can call it the Heartland Conference, but I don't like that for the Ohio Valley. Anyone has a good name for it, let me know because I'm certainly open to renaming it instead of using the old 90s conference that only involved two teams. One other note with Notre Dame, you could certainly toy with putting them in the Big Ten. And you can replace Iowa and put Iowa into this Metro Conference. So they're with Iowa State and some other areas that are closer, but I just don't think it makes sense. I mean, Iowa's been in the Big Ten forever. Curious here. Iowa joined the Big Ten in 1899. So yeah, let's not break that up. So anyway, here is your Metro Conference. All right. So we talked about Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. So let's start talking Texas and Oklahoma. And if anyone remembers the old Southwest Conference, that involved Arkansas. So I hate keeping them away from it, but I think let's bring back the Southwest Conference and include Texas schools along with Oklahoma schools. And you're gonna have a really solid football conference with tons of great rivalries, and teams can make or fans can make road trips very easily in this conference. So we're gonna go Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. Sorry, this is where the map, now I got to start scrolling over a little bit. And Texas, we'll go Texas A&M. And again, a lot of these schools are very, very, very familiar with each other. And we will also include Houston. Texas Tech. And we might get to a point, we will get to a point where, we'll start having too many schools. All right, those are the most obvious. Those are the biggest schools, right? Let's get to the next tier, though. I don't want to call TCU the next tier. They they're almost up there at this point with some of those other big names. So let's go with TCU and SMU. Got to keep these two together. Of course, SMU has the endowment and everything else. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we have 8 schools left here. Can't forget about Baylor, and that is 9. So in the old Southwest Conference days, we had Rice. Rice is in Houston, 68,000 seat stadium, or 70,000, whatever. But I think everybody can agree that their program is certainly not on the level of anywhere near these schools, and I don't think it'll ever come back to that level. So, Rice does belong more in a middle tier group of conferences instead of a bigger one. So who do you replace there? There's several options. You have UTSA. You can also consider Texas State, but I wouldn't put them in that quality at all. One school that I do think can get to that level is the University of North Texas in Denton. Um, it is a gigantic school. UNT, I want to say 50,000 students. They have let's see here. They have, yeah, 46,000 students. It's a huge school. And I do think it's a sleeper in terms of athletic program and school quality. A beautiful stadium that was built maybe 10 years ago. Apogee Stadium. I might be pronouncing that wrong, but a nice 30 to 40,000 seat stadium. I do think it can get to the level of these schools to compete. And yeah, so this is your new or revamped, we'll call it your revamped Southwestern Conference. And there they are. All right, let's go west now. I know we have a lot of schools still left in this part of the country that we have to put into conferences, but the West, you don't have a ton of options, and I think things are a lot simpler here, so we can kind of fly through the West. And Pac-10 is the easiest that we can quickly put together. The Pac-10, rest in peace. I will sincerely miss it. I mean, a little bit of a side story. I run the operations for the company that I work with, WeatherWorks, and I create schedules and things like that. So you can obviously see why I love the organization of what I'm kind of doing right now. But one of the main reasons that I love the Pac-10, especially in basketball, is that it is so nice and tidy of a conference where you've got similar road trips. So basically, you play on a Thursday and a Saturday and you visit the Northern California schools. So if you're on the road, you play Cal and you play Stanford, or you go down to LA and you play UCLA and USC. Or the Oregon schools or the Arizona schools. So like you always have this road trip where you're visiting 2 schools in a state, and it's so simplistic. Again, you have Washington, Oregon, or you had Washington, Oregon, Northern California, Southern California, and Arizona. Like, I don't think it makes any more sense for a conference. So I will sincerely miss it from football and a basketball standpoint. All right, so there's your Pac-10, and just cleaned up a little bit here, the logos and the stuff on the left. All right, now again, we're going to focus here on the west of the Continental Divide, and we only have so many schools to go around, so it's going to get a little bit more difficult. And we have 2 schools from the Pac-12, Colorado and Colorado State, and then we have all of the Mountain West, and it's not going to be enough teams. So I'll show you what we're going to do to make it a 2 10-team conferences. But basically, I want to try and keep the mountain schools together, and then if I can, keep the areas or schools that are in the Pacific or in California or closer to the ocean together as well. So let's stick with the Mountain West. The name's the Mountain West. So let's kind of focus on that and focus on the schools that would belong in the Mountain West. And it's fairly obvious in the beginning here. You've got Colorado and Colorado State. And we're also going to have Air Force. I'll move these guys in the right places here soon. Sorry, Colorado State is in Fort Collins up here, and Colorado Springs is down here. Utah, the Utah schools are obvious too. You're gonna have Utah State in Logan, Utah and Salt Lake City, and then BYU and Provo. And I'll move these around in a bit. Wyoming, which is very close to the Colorado schools. Laramie is in the far southeast part of the state. And then we have New Mexico as well. Now, one school that has not been part of the Mountain West, but was, I think, in the old WAC, is New Mexico State and also UTEP. So we will, instead of having them in Conference USA and playing schools out here, which just makes no sense at all, let's keep them with the mountain schools. So we will add UTEP. Sorry, I lost the minors for a second here. And New Mexico State, which I can't believe they still have that logo. And we are up to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we are all set to go. And we have 10 schools, and they all really make sense. This is kind of where you would want in terms of road trips, as good as you can get it out west. I mean, you've got 4 schools that easily can drive to each other here. And they can even make the New Mexico trip, at least down to New Mexico, to see the Lobos. But yeah, this is what I would want from this conference. 3 states, 4, I guess, if you include Wyoming. So this is your new Mountain West for a 10-team conference. And one thing with this Mountain West Conference too is, I mean, it's a quality conference. I mean, you have programs that can compete, certainly in the playoffs, and even for a national championship between BYU and Utah. Obviously, who knows what Colorado can do? Deion Sanders and everything involved there. But I mean, these are programs that can compete at a national level. I've always liked the Mountain West, and I still do. All right, so we do have some other teams in the current Mountain West Conference that are not included in here. So we're going to bring back the old WAC and create that as a conference. And I move them over to the Pacific Ocean to make things a little bit easier for dragging things over. So we've got Boise State and Fresno State, another really good program that the Bulldogs have always competed well. So we have these 2 schools. We'll include Nevada and Reno and UNLV and San Diego State, San Jose State, and then of course Hawaii. So that is only 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then Hawaii 7. So we're missing 3, and we could have considered having an 8-and-8 conference. But again, I like how the Mountain West is out here, and then further out here is the WAC. But we need a few more programs, and no, I don't know if you guys can guess where I'm going to go with the programs, but think at the FCS level right now. I think we have 2 obvious candidates are a little bit out of this footprint, which isn't great. But the 2 candidates that I would bring in that are obvious are the Montana schools. And I think there's no problem at all for Montana State to come up. Their programs have been very, very good, and great fan bases, awesome stadiums, 20,000, 25,000 seats. I think they would fit in just fine in the WAC. What does suck is that geography, and that, you've got San Diego and UNLV having to travel up to Montana. It's just inevitable in this area, if you're going to get 10 team conferences to make that work. So we're going to bring the Montana schools in. At least again, they're close to Boise, and we're at 9 schools. So we need one more. And this program, I'm not sure if anybody would guess, but I think we can move the Sacramento State Hornets into the WAC. And a lot of people don't realize is this is a school that's done pretty well uh, at the facing FBS level teams. I'm going to take a look here, but I can't remember some of the victories that they've recently had. But they defeated Colorado State 41-10 in 2022. They also, I forgot who they took. Might have been Stanford. They took to overtime last year. They beat Colorado in 2012. They've beaten a lot of FBS schools. They do play in a 21,000 seat stadium, so they have the infrastructure, and they fit in with the California schools too. So you got Sacramento, San Jose State, and then you got Fresno, and then San Diego State down here. So it does fit geographically in here. So I think Sacramento State would be the school that makes that jump up to Division One A. All right, I can't believe that Google only lets you have 10 layers. So I've maxed out my layers. I can't highlight just the conferences. So anyway, here's the WAC schools. So the rest of these we'll have to kind of keep in this one layer. All right, anyway, 3 more to go. We're almost there. So let's take these groupings of schools, and I think I want to go with the Sun Belt next. That's an existing conference. It's one that has some history, a lot of schools that are together. So let's put the Sun Belt together. And when I think Sun Belt, I always think of Louisiana and some of the schools in Mississippi and Alabama. So we'll start there, and we'll go with the Raging Cajuns first in Lafayette, and we'll stick with Monroe as well, and then the northern part of the state. Louisiana Tech, they are not a Sun Belt school, but I think that we're going to want to put them in the Sun Belt as well. Actually, you know what? Take that back. We're gonna keep them out. I think I'll show why here in a little bit. Southern Miss, current Sun Belt school, good for that footprint. Great fan base. We will come on over to Alabama, and we'll go Team USA and Mobile and Troy as well. They are somewhere in here. Okay. Yeah, I want to keep things confined to this area, so we're not going to go further east. We'll talk about how this got split up here between Sunbelt, American, Conference USA. Louisiana Tech is a tricky call, but again, I'll show why that works. We'll keep Arkansas State in the Sunbelt, and then we have some Texas schools and Texas State. Now, one thing you can do is consider, sorry, where's San Marcos? It's getting a little late. I'm losing where, sorry, southwest of Austin. So you could put a lot of the Texas schools together. There's going to be a few more, but there's not enough to make a 10-team conference. So, I mean, certainly there is some consideration to do that. We're going to move Rice into the Sun Belt. I think they're a little better fit into this area, stadium capacity wise and similarity with some other schools, even though that is a private school, and the other ones are state schools. I just like Rice in that spot. UTSA. Same thing, just because of their proximity to Texas State, we're going to move them into the Sun Belt too. And we're going to make an adjustment and put Tulsa in there, and mainly so they have an Arkansas State program. I'm never sure what to do with Tulsa. They don't fit in the Big 12, Big 8 metro conglomeration. They're a little bit out here in the limb on where you go. They're one of three Division I schools that play football in Oklahoma. So yeah, your choices are kind of tough as to what to do in this area. So we have 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we have 10 schools on the Sun Belt. Again, Tulsa a little bit of an outlier. But yeah, this is how I would set up the Sun Belt Conference. Now, let's go and talk about how you want to make the, I guess we'll call it the American, with the other schools that are remaining in here. So we're talking Louisiana Tech. We still have Tulane floating about, which could have been a Sun Belt school. Memphis, UAB, a lot of these schools. That are on the larger end of things. So we'll remove these logos. We'll switch it out with a different layer here so we can get a reset as to what the other conferences look like. So this is the Sun Belt. I know it looks a little messy. Arkansas State, Louisiana Monroe, Rice, South Alabama, Southern Miss, Texas State, Troy, Tulsa, UTSA. Basically, it's the 7 teams in the West Division, plus 3 more from the American Conference, and those 3 more were Tulsa, Rice, and UTSA. So again, keeping those 7 South Sun Belt teams together and then moving 3 from the American. So now let's remake the American Conference. And the American actually, with this latest restructure, has become a little bit more geographically contained. So let's try and keep that going. And I do want to keep some schools that again are quite competitive and can compete at a level that maybe of national quality, for lack of a better word. So we're going to put some Florida schools together. I know UCF will be pissed and feel slighted as well, but they will be with some natural rivals, and maybe they feel like they'll dominate this conference. But I mean, South Florida's made a lot of progress. Memphis has always been a good program too. So I'm not sure they'll completely run away with this American, but UCF will go back to its roots. So we have UCF, we have South Florida. We're going to have 2 other Florida schools, Florida Atlantic and FIU. So 4 Florida schools, and we're going to have Georgia schools together. So Georgia Southern and Statesboro. Sorry, I've lost. Oh, there's Statesboro. And Georgia State up in Atlanta. And we're also going to include UAB and Memphis. These are some longtime programs that have been quite familiar with this conference. And Tulane, again, another team that can give UCF a run for its money. And this is where Louisiana Tech will come in. And I know they've been a Conference USA team. They're not part of the American, but when we get to Conference USA, we're going to focus that further east. So Louisiana Tech just won't make sense there. And is there anyone else I'm forgetting? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So here is the new American Conference. And if we compare the American, so this is what the American Conference looks like. Oops. And let's look at the Sun Belt, and you can see the difference. So Sun Belt is more Western based. There's no Texas schools in the American. Yes, there's some joining or separation between Louisiana Tech and Louisiana Monroe, which isn't great, and Memphis and Arkansas State. But again, we have a little bit more of a Western-based conference compared to Eastern and the Florida schools. So that's the difference between the American and the Sun Belt. And we have one more to go, and we will call this final conference Conference USA. And this is going to be more Eastern based, and I do think there's a lot of good teams here, and teams that are very similar. So let's start putting these together, and much more in the way of natural rivals. Conference USA right now is terrible in the way it's set up. And I know there's been chatter of the Sun Belt and the American and Conference USA trying to make them more geographically sensical conferences, and this is how I think I would do it. So the third tier in this would include Appalachian State up in Boone, and we'll stick with Carolina schools here for a second. So we'll include Charlotte and East Carolina. And do I have all the Eastern schools? Or I'm sorry, all the Carolina schools? I think. I think I do, but we'll put Coastal Carolina there, in South Carolina. Oh no, do I not have? I don't have a Coastal Carolina icon. Oh, sorry. Give me a second. Okay, the magic of pausing a recording. So there is the Chanticleers. We'll stick them here where they belong in Conway. And four nice schools all together pretty well. Let's go north. Old Dominion, Norfolk, of course, James Madison. They're in Harrisonburg. We'll have to get to a football game there at some point. We are at 6 schools right now. We'll include Liberty. Not a fan, but you can't deny what is going on there football-wise. And then we'll go west a little bit. So we'll include Western Kentucky and Bowling Green and Middle Tennessee State and Murfreesboro. And that now gets you to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And our final school out of the 130 is going to be Marshall. And Marshall is in Huntington, so a little bit of an outlier. I don't think you can put them in that metro conference. I wouldn't replace them with anybody else. They are a better fit here with these teams, and we have a nice Carolina, Virginia, Appalachian kind of mix, along with 2 Western schools that can be paired together for a basketball road trip. That does mean we are going to send a few more schools to the FCS level. So right back to FCS will be Sam Houston State from Texas, Kennesaw State, and also Jacksonville State. So they'll go back to 1AA, and that gives us 130 teams. And if you want to see a finished product, we'll kind of click through each of these. So here are the Conference USA teams. And I apologize, this isn't in any groups, but we have the Pac-12, we have the Mountain West, and then we have the WAC set up here. And then we'll click through the rest of these, and I'll show you a final product at the very end. SEC, ACC, Big Ten, MAC, Big East, Metro, Southwest Conference, Sun Belt, American Conference, Conference USA, and then again, Pac-12. Sorry, Google won't let me do more than 10 layers, but we have the Pac-12, Pac-10, Washington State, Oregon, California schools, Southern California schools, USC, UCLA, Arizona State. Our Mountain West schools consist of Colorado State, Colorado Air Force, Wyoming, New Mexico State, UTEP, BYU, Utah, and Utah State. And then our WAC includes newly lifted up to Division 1A, the Montana schools, Boise, Nevada, UNLV, San Diego State, Fresno, Sacramento State also moving up, and Hawaii. And if you want to see what this looks like in a nice and tidy format, I'll erase a few of my notes. And here is your NCAA Division 1A. So hopefully it was a little bit fun putting that together. I always enjoyed it. And if we get some time, we'll tackle 1AA, and then we'll also see what this looks like for college basketball with 300 plus teams. But these are your 13, or I'm sorry, your 10 team 13 conferences here at Division 1A that are based on geography, history, and similar schools. And I'll put this up on my website, so a couple images that you are able to see. Hope you enjoyed it, and take care.